Welcome to WA This Week. Look, I want to touch on a couple of topics. First of all, just the terrible situation of a government who doesn't care about your private information. We saw this week that the Health Department had released private information to passengers who'd been on an aeroplane with someone who had monkeypox. Now, it was proper that they alerted passengers, the individual passengers, to the fact that they could have been exposed to that virus and that they should, make sure that they look out for symptoms and get themselves tested and get treatment if necessary. What was utterly inappropriate was that they shared all of the details of all of the passengers with everyone. Now, if this was a one-off event from the Health Department or the government, then you might say, well, those things might happen from time to time. This is the 7th time that there's been a major data breach where people's personal information has been shared widely with the community. In fact, I've had some other feedback that there are a number of unreported incidents as well, but it all speaks to a government that does not do its job and take proper care of your private data. When you share information with the government, when you provide that information, you have a reasonable expectation that it won't be shared with other people. And because we all know in the world that we live in at the moment, where there are all sorts of scams going on, where people steal people's identity and then use that to steal money or otherwise gain some advantage, we have a government giving out that information. You know, that's unacceptable. The government need to focus on their job. You know, we've got a government that loves to go out and do glossy announcements. They love to put the hard hat on and the fluoro vest on. But constantly what we see across all of their portfolios is that they're not doing the job of government. So Premier McGowan and the rest of your ministers step up and start protecting the data, protecting the private information of the people in Western Australia. I think that's a reasonable request from the general community. This week, we saw the Premier and we saw the Transport Minister, Rita Saffioti, patting themselves on the back because they say that the Forestfield Airport link line is going to open shortly. Now, fascinating to see them patting themselves on the back. This project was already underway when they came into government. So here we are, more than 5 years later, and they're only just now announcing that that project will open. Now, I'm going to be fascinated to see if it actually does open, given all of the problems they've had and they've overseen in terms of getting this project to fruition. But this project is heading into 3 years overdue. And of course, we've got the entire Metronet project, which is years and years overdue, billions of dollars over budget. And you know that those billions of dollars could have gone into the government not increasing your fees and charges, or it could have gone into dealing with the hospital crisis. It could have gone into helping with homeless people and the dreadful problem we have of rough sleepers and homeless people in the city not getting the support they need. But instead it's gone into what is largely a vanity project for the government. Half of all of the government's capital spend has gone into this project so far. So it's a huge commitment of your public money, but then they can't deliver it. Look, it'll be good to see that line up and running when it is going, but I will say that the failure to deliver it properly and on time, as with the rest of the Metronet project, is a failure that sits at the feet of this McGowan Labor government. And farcically, you know, we saw in this budget, they haven't been able to deliver any of their capital projects on time or on budget, and yet they've announced an increased capital spend going forward. You know, perhaps they should stop announcing new projects, stop going out there and spending the community's money and wasting their time making announcements. Perhaps they should focus on actually making sure that the projects they've already announced are completed on time and on budget. And that means that money will be available for other useful purposes, like the terrible crisis we have in hospitals. What a fascinating time in Parliament this week. On Wednesday, we have reports that the Premiers attended, and the Deputy Premier, I might say, have attended $1,000 a bottle wine tasting evenings. And at the same time, we've got public servants whose wages have been held back for a number of years, protesting, and other unionists, I might say, protesting at Parliament House. And we have the Minister for Energy, who's also the Minister for Industrial Relations, the Honourable Bill Johnson, come out to the steps of Parliament House. He was booed off the stage by the unionists. And these are the people that the Labor Party claim to represent. So they're booed off the stage by unionists at the rally, but we've got the Premier and the Deputy Premier who are welcomed with open arms by billionaires at $1,000 a head wine tasting events. I think this really speaks to this so-called Labor Party. This isn't a party that represents ordinary Western Australians. This isn't a party that's representing those people who are struggling. We've clearly seen that with their appalling lack of action on homelessness. This is a government, a Labor government, or in fact Labor ministers, a Premier, Deputy Premier and senior ministers. Where do they want to be? They actually want to be in my electorate. They want to be going to swanky parties in Peppermint Grove and Mosman Park. They want to be feted by billionaires. They want to go out for trips on their boats. They want to stay at their residences. They want to fly in helicopters to parties down in the southwest. Meanwhile, ordinary Western Australians are struggling. You know that your household is struggling to meet the ordinary costs of life. There are many households, I've said this before, many households making the most agonising decisions. You know, do I continue with car insurance? Do I continue with house insurance? Or do I buy food? They are, you know, we're heading to a situation where there is increasing mortgage stress because of rising interest rates. Parents literally making the decision about whether they eat food or they give food to their children. And of course they give food to their children. Do they buy the kids school shoes that fit them or not? They're the decisions that many Western Australians are making, and all of you, I know, are struggling now to cope with this increasing cost of living pressure. And meanwhile, we've got a Premier and a Deputy Premier, but they're not alone. The other Labor ministers, but in this case, attending $1,000 a bottle wine tasting events. We heard the most ludicrous defence from the Premier. The Premier saying, oh, well, I get invited to a lot of events, and yes, I just go along with them and I have to talk with people. You know, the Premier can talk with people in his office. He knew he was going to this $1,000 a bottle wine tasting event. He knew what it was. He chose to do it. Meanwhile, he's ignoring ordinary Western Australians. Where's the cost of living pressure relief from this state government? They have these gimmicky one-off payments. Meanwhile, all your fees and charges have gone up over the term of this government, substantially above the cost of inflation. This is not a Labor Party for ordinary Western Australians. This is a Labor Party that sits cheek by jowl with the wealthiest people in our community, enjoying their patronage while you suffer. It's an appalling reflection on a Labor Party that has completely lost its way. It's not there for the ordinary Western Australians. It's only there for the top end of town. It's time the Premier, the Deputy Premier and those other ministers stopped soliciting invitations to high-end events and started focusing on doing their job properly, of protecting ordinary Western Australians, of making sure law and order is in good shape, of making sure that our hospitals are not overwhelmed. But they're not focusing on that. They're looking for the next invitation where they can drink some expensive wine. It's just a party that is completely out of touch, and a government that's completely out of touch. A couple of big celebrations this week. The first one was this week was the celebration of the 75th anniversary of the independence of India. And you know, I'm sure some of or in fact a good number of people listening to this podcast or watching the video will come from the Indian community, and what a fantastic contributor to Western Australian society. I was chatting to the Consul General and he was telling me there's about 160,000 people either come from India or are the children of people who come from India. So a really big part of our community, and can I say what a dynamic part of our community. I went to their Sangram event just a couple of weekends ago, 2,000 people from that community, and a fantastic celebration, 300 different groups. who were giving, showing traditional dances and modern dances. It was really exciting. So congratulations to all of the Indian community in Western Australia on that great celebration. I've said it a number of times. Alongside the US, there's no country in the world that is going to have more impact on our long-term future than India. It's a crucial partner for Australia, both in terms of security and trade. So congratulations, happy 75th anniversary. The other celebration, and it is a celebration, was Vietnam Veterans Day. Many of you would know that the Vietnam veterans, when they came back to Australia at the end of the Vietnam War, were very poorly treated. And we've seen some really sad outcomes in that veteran community in terms of a whole range of mental health issues. And I think it's been a great thing for some while now that there's been proper recognition of the contribution and the sacrifice that those veterans made to defend us and to do what they were asked to do by our government. And I just offer my best wishes to all of those Vietnam veterans. I do meet a lot of veterans when I'm out and about, and there's a lot of good work going on in terms of engaging veterans in the broader community and dealing with a lot of those legacy issues from that awful war, especially in terms of mental health. So to all of the Vietnam veterans, thank you for your sacrifice, thank you for your service, and thank you for what you've done for Australia. Look, thanks very much for listening. As always, I'm really grateful that you take the time to do that. Please give us your feedback. I know I say it every time, but I'll keep saying it. Really, really look forward to your feedback. It helps us, helps me in terms of topics you may be interested in. Don't forget, you can subscribe to this as a podcast on any podcast platform now. So just look for WA This Week and you can subscribe to it. And otherwise, the video is available on LinkedIn or YouTube. Please share it with your friends. Please get the message out. A lot of you are doing that, and it's really great to see that. I get a lot of feedback from people, and look, it's just one way to get an alternative message out to the community so that people know what's happening in our state. Thank you very much.